we wanted to talk about freedom. Again, it's one of those broad topics where we'll probably go in a certain direction, but I did ask my friend ChatGPT about what it means to be free. um, and he spoke about a few different types of freedoms. There's political freedom, personal freedom, economic freedom, social freedom, freedom of thought and expression, freedom from want and fear, positive freedom versus negative freedom, and cultural and moral freedom. And as I was going through the definitions of each of these things, I realized that maybe you're onto something and we're not as free as we think we are. Because the only one I could say I feel like I have freedom in is the personal freedom, which is the autonomy an individual has over their own life and choices. It encompasses the freedom to make decisions about one's beliefs, values, and lifestyle without interference from external sources, which not 100% because there are definitely external sources and there are interferences. But just personally, I feel like I can make my own decisions. I can go where I want to go. I can work where I want to work. I can do the things that I enjoy. So in that sense, I feel free.
Mm. But there are definitely different degrees to that.
Yeah,
So, for
definitely.
example, you cannot go and see a medical specialist tomorrow if you feel like I want
No.
to go see her.
Wait,
Okay.
you could
So
go
that,
to a private. You could pay a lot of money and
okay, cool.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but what I mean in terms of there's like these different degrees of freedom for me.
yeah,
So, depending on what passport or nationality you are, you can't go and work and live anywhere in the world you want to,
no. In
which is
fact,
not
you
necessarily
can't
a
even
bad thing.
travel everywhere you want to.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing necessarily, because I do believe that there should be rules that govern certain things and so on. But just in terms of the illusion of you are free. So for me, from all the things that you read, all the different types of freedom, I feel like the only one that we can really is freedom of thought.
just as long as you don't vocalize it.
Yes.
You can think whatever you want, just don't say it out loud.
Correct, because then, as we've seen, you can get yourself in so much trouble.
Yeah,
But I think that, for me, the question or the why I contemplate or think about freedom is it's so easy to say we are free,
yeah,
and, and usually from a political sense, it is it is very much linked to we live in a democratic society, and therefore we are free, which is not the truth.
yeah,
It is absolutely not the truth. And by saying that, I'm not knocking democracy as a system or anything. I'm just saying, well, don't be under any illusion
yeah. That you
that
actually
you
have
that you
a say.
actually are free
Yeah,
and that you have a
yeah.
say. So within these certain circles or confines, you have a say
Mm-hmm.
and you are free. You can decide whether you are going to show up for work or not. You can decide whether you are going to, I don't know, go out for dinner or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of choice and lots of freedom there. But I don't think that we should fool ourselves in that we are free. So I think the average person, just by the way that they live their lives, don't really realize how not free they are.
Yeah, yeah,
So, for example, you cannot open any type of business where you are.
yeah,
Okay. So, by definition, then that means that you are not free. You're not free to do as you will.
yeah.
And I'm going to say it again. I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I'm not saying that you should be allowed to do kidney transplants in your kitchen as a side hustle
Yeah.
or something like that. We fully understand why there have to be regulations, etc., etc. But just to my point of people's lives are generally organized around these very narrow confines.
Yeah.
You go to school, you go to university, you find a job, you and those are the lanes that you operate in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not freedom.
So, what does freedom look like to you? What would make you free?
What would make me free is, um, I think Nassim Taleb has the best definition of that, and I'm going to butcher it. I don't have the quote in front of me, but he says, "You, you, you are not free when you are not a servant, but also when you are not a master."
Okay.
So, and we see that, in the workplace typically, you start and then you want to work yourself up and then you want to become some kind of a leader or manager or whatever. Now you are in charge of other people. I mean, that is as restrictive to your freedom as having to report to
Well,
anybody else.
that's the whole thing, is being responsible for other people makes you much less free. That's what, when you had asked me the question the first time, I said I'm very free because I don't have children or things, like I don't have things that are
Mm.
holding me back or making me make certain
Yes,
decisions. But then when I thought about it a bit longer, I was like, am I really?
yes.
Yeah.
So that for me is kind of like the ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
If I don't have to, if I'm not accountable to anybody else, my life is not influenced by anybody else, a government, a society, a social group, or whatever, and also where nobody else is reporting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that to me would be ultimate freedom.
I mean, there's no, that's unattainable, right?
That is
Yeah.
unattainable.
And I was gonna just say, not just in our lifetime, I think in the future too. Like, I don't see any, I don't think it's
Yeah.
possible. Yeah.
But you can actually expand that to as far as possible in your own kind of life, in your
Mm-hmm.
own life, and in your own circle of influence, etc. So, for example, I was thinking about this the other day. So, you remember the old Janis Joplin song Bobby McGee, where it says freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
Yeah.
Okay. If you think about that, if you have absolutely nothing,
Yeah.
so there's no threat that anybody can come and take your shit.
Mm-hmm.
You have none of these other responsibilities that typically come with it. We all aspire to these things. You want to buy a car, you want to buy a house, you want to raise kids. All of these things come with a price tag.
Yeah.
And generally, that comes in terms of I owe somebody a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So if you have none of those things, or if you have very little of them, then that means that you are actually, I don't know, are you more free than the person who sits with a fancy car and the fancy house, but with a big bond and with a
Well,
cannot
again,
even think about changing job because shit,
yeah. There's levels though there again, because there's different types of freedom. They have a different type of freedom to the person with nothing. They can get in their car and go anywhere. The person with no car is stuck because he can't get where he needs to go. So I think again, there's like a different. You have to contextualize what kind of freedom you mean. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
look, the opposite of that is also true. If there's economic hardship, the guy already has very little and doesn't owe anybody.
yeah,
He's going to be less affected
mm-hmm.
by, I don't know, higher interest rates,
Yeah,
um, being out of a job for a period of time for whatever reason, etc., etc.
yeah,
So I actually think that the middle class, everybody, we all aspire to be middle class.
mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's where it happens.
Yeah,
But we are so not free while you're there. If you're below middle class, and I fully understand from all other aspects, it is better to be middle class than, you know, in poverty.
mm-hmm.
Um, but just that the the responsibilities that you carry with you for that car payment, for that bond payment,
Yeah,
for the private schools for the kids, and all of these things that go, and also that lifestyle that accompany that.
yeah,
So, and then you think about, well, what if I can just get, what is that
yeah.
next level above middle class? I don't really know what that is called, but then you get to like the level of the super rich.
Yeah.
So is it middle class and then fuck your money? No, fuck your money is even
Upper
higher.
upper middle class and then higher middle class and then
Upper middle class
super
just
middle
means you have
class.
more debt. That just means you have more debt.
And you pay higher tax, so you get less disposable income.
Exactly.
I
But
actually
then you,
saw
but
Eric Weinstein talking about being in the company of super rich and that they don't believe that they're that rich. They're still talking about the people who are more rich than them, and that
yes,
they they
yes,
don't actually consider themselves rich, super
correct,
rich.
correct.
Yeah,
And you know, you look at some of these guys, and you think to yourself, geez, you know, is it really nice? Well, I mean, these numbers that we see thrown out, I mean, that's just paper numbers, you know, that's
yeah,
just all sits in shares and whatever, etc., etc. Um, but if you get to that kind of a level, you know, if you have that level of wealth that supposedly somebody like Mark Zuckerberg or whoever has,
yeah,
you know, there's a hell of a lot of responsibility that come with that.
yeah,
It's like how many employees, you know, it's like 200,000 employees, you know. Do you actually
yeah.
want to, well, do you really care about all 200,000 of them? I don't know.
Unlikely.
It's impossible. You can't.
Yeah,
You can't.
yeah,
You can't even know them all and so on. But that overall responsibility, even if you're only responsible for 50 people on the level below you, you know, that's already a massive, massive
yeah,
responsibility, you know. And especially where you get to, you know, how many people out there is. So, so, I have a lot of sympathy, empathy for those people
yeah,
that sit in those very high positions and the responsibility that they have. And they may have a lot of the um, financial benefit short term, but what is it that they sacrifice in terms of freedom, in terms of quality of life, and a whole bunch of other things? I mean, last I think it was last week, a banker in America, I think Wells Fargo Bank or whatever, jumped out of the window of his office,
yeah,
and very, very successful, or so it seemed. But imagine all the pressure, etc., on these guys. So, so that for me, you know, that takes away from my freedom. Everybody thinks that they want to be Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. Or, nobody really wants, or very few people
yeah.
actually have the the makeup to operate and function at that level.
Definitely.
And I think that those guys are so far from free. It may look great, private jet, I can go and I can fly anywhere, etc., etc. But if you look at, the reasons why they have that, and what their schedules look like and so on, I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me at all
Yeah.
from a freedom point of view.
I mean, they have financial freedom. They can,
Yes,
yeah, buy anything, but then they also have a huge responsibility on them, like you say. And I don't think it's just a responsibility to their employees or their families or whatever. It's also to society. I feel like a lot of responsibility gets placed on the super rich to make a difference to society.
correct. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that. So back to the point in the concept of freedom, and what we said in the beginning is I feel like people are under this illusion
Mm-hmm.
that we are free. I mean, if I look in the South African context, pre 1994, post 1994, people thought that after 1994 and the election, we are free.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are free. Okay. But what has changed? Are we better off? So my point about that is, a lot of people expected that because there's political freedom,
Mm-hmm.
that things are going to magically change.
Yeah.
Um, we, I mean, I use South Africa as an example because this is where I've been all my life. But again, we can use so many other countries as examples for a similar thing. You kind of see that play out in every election cycle, if you will. Um, People throw this word about freedom around without understanding the bigger context and
Yeah.
how limited their freedoms are anyway. And that I feel is a concern because now we're sitting at a stage where not even governments, not even armies, but other social groups, in other words, people who think slightly different to to me or to you, um, actually want to impose their way of thinking
Mm-hmm.
and their way of doing on you.
Yeah.
We see this with all the illegal immigrants that are, I don't know, all over the place at the moment. So that that affects the freedom of other people
Yeah.
significantly. And that's why I feel strongly about, listen, I think it's worth spending a little bit of time thinking about what is
How
freedom? What does
free.
freedom mean to you and how free are you?
Mm. I I wanted to touch on just because you mentioned the illegal immigrants. Do you have any thoughts on what an appropriate solution would be there? I'm just trying to because I can
I
see it
think
from
that
both sides, and I just want to. I know
I
it's an
think
issue. Yeah.
I think that the appropriate solution for that is countries should close their borders and have very specific um, conditions under which you can enter the country.
Well, they do.
They do, then why don't they?
Yeah.
Why don't they? Because that's the thing. If any of those people that are landing in these boats in whichever country, or walking across the southern border in the US, if any of, I mean, how many of those, if they follow the correct channels, will actually be granted asylum or, you know, refugee status,
Mm.
or very few of them. But on the other side of that, you look at, I mean, pick a city, etc. Let's look at New York. New York is now overrun. The government is paying hotels with taxpayer money to house illegal immigrants. And the taxes that should have been used for the citizens that pay those taxes
Mm.
are now being wasted on something. And crime is up.
But what is
You
the
know,
alternative for people that are, for example, fleeing wars or like the Ukrainians? Obviously, that was a big thing here in the UK.
how many Ukrainians are in the UK? The Ukrainians are not the ones storming the borders. But if you look at what's happening in well, what's it in Italy mostly is Tunisians and I don't know the southern border of the US. I mean, there's no war that people are
Yeah.
fleeing from. So the
It's just poor
Venezuelans may say,
living
well, you know what,
conditions.
poor living
So
conditions
they should be
or
going to their
whatever.
government and storming the government.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
If every poor person in the country or in the world that is unsatisfied with their living conditions now all of a sudden decide to go to the US or to the UK because, well, conditions are not to my liking. I mean, that's just chaos.
Mm.
It's absolute chaos. It doesn't benefit anybody,
Yeah.
least of all those people that actually go into those countries. I mean, and it's in my opinion, it's going to end in a disaster.
Mm.
But um, I mean, even in South Africa, we're sitting with 25% of the people in this country are not South Africans.
Mm-hmm.
That is a that is a big number. There's no plan to really stop it or do anything about it, and it affects us. Um, but anyway, we're kind of going a little bit off topic in terms of freedom.
Yeah.
Um, you see, one of the things that really irks me is I don't have the freedom to say, listen, if you are going to spend 25% of the budget for social welfare, whatever, on foreigners that are not here legally, I am going to only pay 75% of the taxes that you think I should pay. I
Yeah.
cannot do that.
Yeah. And you don't really have
Um,
much say in where your taxes are distributed
no,
anyway. Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah.
So another simple example. I feel that I pay far too much bank fees. Well, it's ridiculous the amount of money that I have to pay on bank fees
Mm-hmm.
compared to the service that I get.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have actual examples where they are just absolutely useless in doing the most basic functions.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, it is reported that my bank has made a 1.7 billion rand profit last year. How?
From everyone's
Why?
bank fees.
And not providing any service for that.
Yeah.
But I don't have the freedom because all banks are like that. I don't know. I'm obviously generalizing a little bit here, but in terms of the big recognized banks, and it's such a pain in the ass, and trying to deal with another one is anyway. So I don't have freedom there.
Yeah.
So those are just two very high level examples where I feel like my freedom is I because of the levels of crime, I don't have the freedom to go to certain parts of town at
Mm.
certain times.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's those things that if we say we don't generally think of it as these things um, take away some of our freedoms, but they do.
Yeah. No, we're. I think the conclusion is we're not as free as we think we are.
That's certainly my conclusion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, something to think about. I think ask yourself the question. I suppose it starts with how free do you think you are, and then how free are you really?
And maybe and maybe come up with solutions of how to, because maybe my thinking around this is just warped.
Yeah. Well, we're all thinking in the context of what we know and what we experience daily. So everyone's going to have a slightly different view on this. But
Mm.
yeah, I'm not as free as I thought I was, which is a sad reality. Cool. Until
On
next
this
time.
somber note,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali.